Anthony, I think we're live right now.
Good, sir.
Good evening, everybody. I am here with our state election commissioner this evening, Anthony Almetz. Now, he sent me a short bio. I'm going to say a little bit about Anthony. He's just been in the job of elections commissioner since what, earlier on? It was
mid 2019. Yeah.
Yeah, mid 2019. He has been with the Department of Elections since 2007. Previously, before he was state elections commissioner, he was the county director of Newcastle County. He's got certifications out the wazoo here. He knows what he's doing. He's well educated. He knows, about what it takes to administer an elections in the state, and we're lucky to have him. Prior to his work in elections, and this I find very interesting, you led and managed nonprofit organizations serving youth and young adults. So I applaud you for that. And you were in the banking industry as well. A little bit of a change for you. Lived your whole life in Wilmington?
I have, yes, sir.
Yeah, you got your undergrad in political theory from Catholic University of America and a graduate degree in urban affairs and public policy from UD. So welcome to my virtual town hall on election issues tonight. I'm kind of previewing what we're doing here, and looks like both of us are able to be seen at the same time. Got the screen up here so that if anybody has questions. Now, I do have a list of questions that were sent in through the survey, but as we're going through this town hall, if anybody has questions, go ahead and enter them into the comments, and we'll do our best to answer them as we go along. Okay?
Great.
Okay. Again, welcome. And, election day is less than a week away. I see you're there in the shop tonight.
Yes.
It looks like you're there in the sorting room, or, with mail trays behind you and the sorting machines. Mm-hmm. So really appreciate you spending the time tonight to come on and to answer people's questions. I mean, this is a very unique election year. A lot of different variables that are going on, a lot of new things that are happening all this year. We've got new machines at the polling places. We have some new processes internally for reporting information out. And then we have a huge influx of mail-in and absentee ballots that are coming into the Department of Elections. So a lot of the questions that we have are going to be centered around those types of things. And let's go ahead and get started here. Now, I've kind of broken this up into blocks so that we're not going all around the place tonight. So I want to start with voter registration. When the state mailed out all of the applications for the absentee or mail-in ballots, first for the presidential primary, then for the primary election in September, and now for the general election, you saw on social media and a lot of the radio talk shows people concerned about them getting ballot applications for people that didn't live there anymore. So the first question kind of comes in terms of how do you purge those voter rolls? How do we make sure the voter rolls are as accurate as possible? Kind of looking at, deceased individuals, and I know there's probably a different process between in-state and out-of-state where these individuals passed away, and individuals that have moved. We're seeing those in, in rental homes and apartments and things like that as well. So if you can talk about that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. We've got a few different processes for address verification and list maintenance, as we call it. Under the federal laws, the NVRA or Motor Voter Act, one of the provisions that kind of was involved with that was standardizing the process for address verification and requiring that we have returned mail pieces to initiate that process. Basically, we have to have a returned mail piece from the voter, and a piece, for example, that was sent out, let's say, for example, these mailings that you were referencing, for vote by mail, they're not forwardable, and that's intentional rather. So we get those pieces back and we get notification if someone's no longer in residence where we believe they're in residence. And then a follow-up verification mailing must be sent to those individuals. And that follow-up mailing must give the individual the option of either affirming that they do live where they say they live, either that or informing us they live elsewhere in the state, or informing us that they have moved from the state and we may cancel their registration. So it's a two-step process.
Okay.
And if we do not hear from someone from that follow-up mailing within 60 days, they will automatically go into an inactive status, meaning that that's a flag for us that we have an address issue that needs to be corrected. Now, someone could always correct that issue by initiating contact with us, either by, for example, updating their registration, or someone could even perhaps apply for an absentee ballot or arrive at a polling place on election day. But they would be flagged that we would need to verify their address before they could be allowed to vote. Now, if that voter stays in the inactive status that they go into after that 60 days, and 2 election cycles then pass with federal offices on the ballot, then they are purged, as they're called, or removed from the rolls. And the purging takes place on non-election years, off years, odd-numbered years, the first half of the year. There is also an additional federal law in place that, and this is not a practice that we normally would do and have done in Delaware anyway, but there is a federal law as part of that federal law I mentioned earlier that these actions cannot necessarily be taken right before an election. So say right now you couldn't have a major purge just because of the closeness to the election, and you may have those folks, as I mentioned, who could be inactive and who may reactivate themselves by wishing to vote on election day, again, once that correction's made.
Yeah.
Now, that's just one means, and it used to be the only means, actually, that we would use to verify addresses. Another piece that we have now, another tool we have kind of in the toolbox now, is our involvement with ERIC, which is an organization called the Electronic Registration Information Center. And Delaware was, in fact, one of the founding members of that. And there are 30 states active in that now. And there are several states that are in the process of considering membership. None, of course, coming on board this year right before the election, but hopefully next year.
Okay.
So what that is, it's a great tool. It actually came out of an initiative by the Pew Center for the States and a study they did of voter registration rolls and accuracy and the need for the updates and how that could be improved. And it's really a tremendous process. Myself, I was one of the folks from the state of Delaware in my former role that was involved when this was formed before it became an official entity. So it's very exciting, I think. And what it entails is that these 30 states, and hopefully soon to be 33, 35 states, share a motor vehicle and voter registration information. There is a compact or an agreement between the states. It is authorized by our state law and the state laws of the other member states. And we're able to share that information securely. And there is a highly sophisticated matching process that is done. And that's actually developed by a consortium of individuals. They were from private industry, public industry, a lot of people who are very savvy computer and cybersecurity experts that developed these algorithms to match these pieces of information. And all of this data exchange is done securely in a secure environment. Everything's hashed, as it's called, in the field. I know you're familiar with this, certainly. So there's no direct sharing of information that's not secured. But all that being said, the good news is, the bottom line is that what we get out of that is a really good tool, is a really good product, I should say, is that we can get reports, and we get reports of individuals who either we believe have or are pretty much have confirmed moved from Delaware to another state, another one of these member states. Mm-hmm. So we can actually reach out to them at their new address that's been confirmed, because let's say they go and move to Maryland and they requested a driver's license, or they registered in Maryland. Instead of going through that first process that I mentioned, that it's lengthy, can be a lengthy time, we could send a message directly to the person and say, oh, they live in Calvert County, Talbot County, Maryland now. And we could say, can you, again, it jumps to that second mailing, basically saying, can you confirm this is your correct address? Are you no longer in Delaware? Or have you perhaps moved back? Let us know. And then we can go ahead and make those corrections. So really, it's been a very useful tool for us. And we've been in ERIC now for about 6 years. So that's very exciting.
Good.
I also wanted to hit the third point you mentioned about those who were deceased. So we receive reports monthly from the Bureau of Vital Statistics in the state. Used to be a manual process. Now it's an electronic, again, secure electronic process where we receive notifications of individuals who have passed away, certainly within the state of Delaware, but also the Vital Statistics folks, that agency has a similar compact with their compatriot agencies in other states to share information for maybe Delaware residents, for example, who passed away in Maryland or Virginia and other states. So that helps expedite that. And we still have, for those who are deceased, we still actually go through kind of the old-fashioned process as well. People in our offices actually check obituaries, local obituaries as well. That was it used to be the only way we had for out of state, but now we still do it just to see if an individual maybe has passed away in another state and was not reported in the Vital Statistics report. So there's a whole host of ways that we do that. However, I think the most important thing I can emphasize, and many folks have done this, is when we do large mailings like this, and the recent mailings we've done certainly are more than we've normally ever done. Normally we just have a polling place card mailing every other year. So we are going to be using those mailings that we have received back to undertake on a large scale that address verification process that I mentioned. Those individuals, and we will be able to use some of this automation equipment to help us be more efficient in doing so. The equipment that we actually obtained for the vote by mail has capabilities where we can use that to, of course, process the mail, of course, as you know, coming back. That'll help us expedite that and get those people into address verification and get them started to get off the rolls if they're no longer active or no longer living, where we have them on file.
Okay, so I guess from the people that are receiving these mailings, I guess the best advice to give them would be, don't just throw it in the trash.
Please don't.
On there, person's not here, return to sender, whatever, and stick it back in the mailbox so that it can get back to the Department of Elections and be processed the right way.
That's absolutely right. We need that. We need that process to start initiated. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Let's see. I don't think there are any questions off of that. Nope. All right. So we'll go ahead and move. Let's see. We'll move to the next part here. Let's see. What federal statutes surround voter registration? So we've got two federal laws that were passed many years apart, the Motor Voter Bill and the Help America Vote Act. What are the requirements that you or that us as Delaware have to follow because of those two laws?
Sure. And we covered a little bit of the address verification piece under the Motor Voter, but the primary piece that really the NVRA, again, which is commonly known as Motor Voter, the real big thing that implemented was the provision of voter registration services at the Division of Motor Vehicles. Okay. So Delaware we were really out in front on that, and a lot of states have actually come here to check our system because we had that full integration with the Motor Vehicle Agency back as far as 2009. We had a connection a long time before that, but 2009 was when we went online essentially with the real-time updates, which is why many people will be familiar with you would go to the DMV and make a transaction, update your registration. You would see a polling place card almost right away. Right. It used to be paper-based. Now our folks see it in real time. So very excited about that, and that's worked really well. And DMV have been great partners. So I'd say under that piece, under Motor Voter, so to speak, the Motor Vehicle Agency provision, and also the provision of voter registration services at other designated state agencies. In Delaware, it's Health and Social Services as well as Department of Labor. And in recent years, they use more of the iVote platform because a lot of their services are self-service now as opposed to in-person. Okay. That was a big part of it, that and the address verification process I described earlier. Now, the Help America Vote Act, when that came about after the 2000 election, that provided for some additional enhancements. Again, thankfully, Delaware was ahead of the curve on a number of them. One of the big items that came about was that we had to have a centralized state database of voter registration. We were already on the way with that because of our centralized nature of elections. So we were pretty far ahead, but a lot of states were not far ahead. They had county-based systems that maybe didn't even talk to each other, which was very problematic. So if they had an in-state move, it would be very chaotic. So that was a big piece of that. And there were also other provisions for voters' rights, where we would have, and we had this in our polling places, distinct statements of voters' rights, of what voters can expect, what are the laws, we have to provide those, and we post them in the polling place, what voters can expect, how voters can register a concern with us if something has happened. It also introduced some other voter tools, such as the provisional ballot, that was really not available. In the past, voters were turned away and without the option for any recourse. So that was another provision, was that provisional ballot, that a voter has to be provided that before, really as a last option, before they are turned away without the ability to vote at all. So there's a lot of innovations. There really is a lot of, especially Help America Vote Act, was a lot of tools for the voter, and a lot more information became available. Probably the last thing I can mention on that is that created the Election Assistance Commission, which is a federal entity, and that provides a lot of good information and resources for voters, and provides a lot of support to state elections agencies. That came out of that, the EAC. So there's a lot of good things came out of that after the 2000 election. Okay,
great. I think with those questions, we've answered quite a few that were out here on the list regarding voter registration. With the mass mailings that we did this year, there have been a lot of questions about that, and I think with the systems that are in place and the systems that are coming in place, with a connection to other states, and then you start processing that returned mail, I think we're going to be able to clean up our voter list quite a bit. And I know as an elected official, we get our voter lists on a regular basis as well. And there are times when I know that I see somebody in there that I know isn't living there anymore.
Right.
The Department of Elections know, and you guys are very, always very good about, marking that person and making sure that those lists are as accurate as possible.
That's great, and I was going to mention that we really appreciate that too. When you send us those returned cards and other items you send out, those really very helpful to us.
Good. Well, we'll continue to do so. Let's see here. Let's go to the big one here: mail-in and absentee ballots.
Sure.
Okay. So, what process is used to validate the voter actually requested an absentee ballot or mail-in ballot, and then returned the ballot? So it's what's the process to make sure it was the actual person, and not somebody else who might have gotten that that mailing for somebody who's moved out of the area or who's deceased.
Sure. Each of those applications that come in are personally reviewed by an individual. They're compared to voter registration files. Verifications are done in that regard. It's not automated. I want folks to know that. And if there's any irregularity of any sort, anything out of the ordinary that we see, that is immediately referred to one of the supervisors or one of the directors. Okay. So everything is touched individually. And nothing is automated. So it's not just an automated process. So we want folks, to know that for sure. So it's very carefully reviewed. And
now, how are they reviewed? I mean, what's actually looked at? Is it signature, handwriting? Is it other pertinent information?
Other pertinent information, right? We verify, like address. We even take a look and make sure that the person again is in that active status. That there's nothing unusual about the record. We make sure everything from it could be a check of voting history, could be an address check, making sure that all those key points of data match before anything is processed. And again, anything is flagged that's out of the ordinary for follow-up. Actually contacting the voter and verifying that if there is anything that's out of the ordinary.
Right.
So each one is touched. So it's labor intensive, but it's needed. It's necessary.
Okay. All right. If a ballot has been requested, but not yet received by the voter, can they go to their county Department of Elections office and fill out an absentee in person? If so, what's the process behind that?
Okay, sure. So, meaning, I'm sorry, if a ballot was received and then the person decides they would like to vote a different way, I'm sorry.
No. If they requested an absentee ballot or a mail-in ballot, but they haven't gotten it in the mail.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake. Yes, that's exactly right. They can do a couple of things. They could go to the office, as you mentioned, and vote in person absentee, and that's the same in-person absentee we've had, for many years.
Right.
And then their information again would be verified, and that certainly we have checks in the system so that there's only ever one active ballot for any voter. So certainly, if by chance later that mailed ballot, say, number one, let me even back up a half step. Certainly, if there was a ballot requested already by that voter, let's say they returned the application that they received and they had requested a ballot, that would immediately be voided, number one, so that the person would never have more than one active ballot. Okay. So that's how that would work. And that's also how that would work at the polling place. So that, let's just fast forward a little bit and say that someone had in fact requested a ballot. They had returned that application, they requested a ballot, and then they changed their mind. They decided they didn't want to return it. I'd rather vote in person. Very similar process. We see that in our poll books at the devices at the polling place that we check in. The voter would be allowed to vote because, again, the ballot's not been returned. It may be requested, but not returned. So that, however, places that notice on their record that they have already voted. Okay. And then, again, what that would mean is that consequently, if by chance that requested ballot was ever to be returned, let's just say, being positive and giving every benefit of the doubt, say someone forgot and they returned the ballot and they forgot they did so. Once after they voted in person at the polling place, if that mailed ballot were to come back in, that when someone would try to check that in, there would already be that notation on the record: person has voted, ballot is voided, cannot be entered. So always a check and balance there.
Okay. So when let's say, kind of go from it the other way, somebody goes ahead and votes at 7 o'clock in the morning in person at the polls.
Right.
Then later on in the day, their mail-in or absentee ballot comes into Department of Elections, and when the post office does their last big dump for the day there at the office. Once that's scanned in for that person, then that ballot will be set to the side, and because that person has already
it'll come up as voided, and void that ballot, and we still retain it for records, as part of the election record, but we would have it it would be segregated out into a voided group and would be retained.
Okay. All right. Now you alluded to one question where you thought I was asking something. If somebody does a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, and something happens and they decide, what, I want to change my vote. Is that something that with our system here we were able to do, or what's the process for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. We get that question from folks. If there is sufficient time, now we're getting really honestly too close now, and I'll explain that, of course, in a moment. Say this was several weeks back, and someone had just requested a ballot, and they decided, for some reason they changed their mind. We would try to accommodate them, certainly, if they decided, I changed my mind, or I made a mistake, and the ballot had not yet been processed. We would certainly, and always have, even in years past with just absentee, to try to accommodate that. Have the voter, we could void that, resend it. Now, since we're so close to the election, and since we have such a volume now, and with undervote by mail, we can begin processing the ballots, which of course we've already been doing. At this point, it'd be very difficult because pretty much as soon as those ballots come in, we're beginning to process them so that we have those scanned and ready to tabulate at close of polls. So it would be really hard for folks. I mean, they're certainly welcome to call and contact their county office, but it's probably unlikely at this point, unfortunately, just because of the timing.
Yeah, that's already been tallied.
Probably already been opened and exactly.
Now, this is a question that came in through YouTube. What happens if you move out of your state to another state within a couple of weeks before an election? Where do you vote? Do you come back to your last state to vote where you're registered, or do you vote in your new state under a provisional vote, or what?
That's a good question. Basically, what happens in those situations, if someone has moved, let's say moved into Delaware after the registration deadline, which of course was October 10th, so we're quite way past that now, they would need to go back to their former state. Now, what would happen, there is a provision, and it's very not very frequently used. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes elections officials aren't even familiar with the process because it's so infrequently used. But that voter is to be afforded a ballot for the presidential office only, because that's the common office. And we've had that happen in Delaware. I know in my time in elections, we probably had it happen about 3 times where we've had a voter, actually, usually it's been the reverse. A voter, for example, moved to Pennsylvania about 8 years ago. This happened. But after their deadline, they came back to Wilmington, Newcastle County, and we were able to process them and vote the presidential only.
Okay.
It's the only common office. But there is that provision, so they at least can vote for that office.
Okay. All right. Very good. Let's see here. Pertaining to voting, and in particular mail-in voting, how many mail-in voter applications were printed up and sent out?
We had for the primary. I'll go back to the state primary.
Okay.
The provisions of the legislation were that all those who are registered with a party, so Democrat or Republican, those eligible in the primary, who had not already requested an absentee ballot, were sent them. And we have some people who are permanent absentee, of course, already. So it's about 470,000 total.
Okay.
Now, for the general election, similar provision, however, of course, for everyone, was mailed to everyone. No party affiliation, came into play. Right. And again, individuals who had not already requested an absentee or vote by mail ballot at that point. So that was about 525,000 total.
Okay.
Went out. And just for numerical sake, we have 735,000 registered voters in Delaware as of this month. Just over 735.
What was the cost of the printing, the mailing?
The total cost for the mailing, each was about, when you factor all of it, about $200,000 approximately.
Now, I believe that we got federal CARES money to.
We did, yes.
But I think that was in the range of 800,000.
We actually got a total of $3 million actually.
Okay.
Yes, each state got, as you know, of course, the legislator, I know you know this, of course, the state got CARES funding in general, and then there was a separate group of CARES funding for elections,
right? Specifically
for COVID-19 that has to be allocated this year. Okay. So pretty much we expect all of our costs, just about all of our costs, to be covered with that. Those federal grants did require a 20% match, so the state does have to match that, and the state agreed to do that when they accepted the funds, because that was requirement. But we pretty much expect just about everything to be covered by the CARES funding.
And I do recall the fiscal note for the mail-in balloting, the mail-in voting bill was in the $850,000 range. I think that's where I came up with that's where that $800,000.
That's absolutely right. Right.
That's for the additional cost. So I'm probably thinking additional people there at the Department of Elections offices to process and additional, or were there additional machines and scanners and things like that?
Additional equipment costs, like some of the equipment here that you're seeing, the staffing, as you said, certainly your postage, printing, all those materials as well. Exactly. So those were all the key items.
Okay. Good. We got a question that came up on Facebook. How is the death count factored into numbers of eligibility for voting?
Well, as soon as we receive notice that an individual is deceased, they are removed right away. There's no additional processing. So that list of voters that I mentioned, that would have already had anyone removed that by this count beginning of October, had we had received notice of deceased. And we do have also, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this earlier, in terms of the deceased option, I shouldn't say option, the deceased situation, we do have an option, as well as for moved out of state, we do have an option where we, for Delaware law, a close relative can inform us, and they sign affirming this, that an individual has passed away in their family or has moved out of state. So that is also another option for those list updates. So if someone has an adult child that's moved out of state, for example, or they've had a parent who has passed away, they can affirm that to us and certify that they are reporting that information. And that's another way sometimes that we can get those individuals who may not show up. I think there's, I think Delaware's been really fortunate, and let yourself and other members of the General Assembly, I think we've had a lot of good legislation go in to help us with elections. And something like that was very helpful, that next of kin could notify us. It seems like a simple thing, but it wasn't permitted before. Now we have a provision for that, and it really helps.
Okay, good. Staying on the absentee and mail-in subject. So when are the ballots being counted, for the record? And how are the running tallies kept confidential until the polls close and those final numbers are reported in?
Sure. We, under the provisions of the vote by mail legislation, we can begin preparing the ballots 30 days prior to the election. So by preparing, what that means is after the ballots have been checked in, which they normally are as they arrive, we verify that the ballot itself is complete, the ballot envelope is complete, that it's sealed, etc. And then the ballot may then be opened. And what happens is, and just as a lot of these practices are carryover mirror absentee for years and years and years. So as soon as that happens, the envelope is opened and it's immediately separated from the ballot, and it's never rejoined with the ballot. So you always maintain that anonymity of the vote. And then you have just those practical steps that happen, like the ballot's unfolded and flattened out. They're grouped together into the various districts as they're processed, and then they're prepared for scanning. We have high-speed scanners, and what they do is they actually, everyone knows if they've seen one of the ballots, it's an optical scan system, so similar to a standardized test, Scantron, or other tests you may have taken in school. As you know, you color in the circles, and they're very sophisticated scanning machines that pick up the colored oval in and allocate that towards the particular candidate. So in this 30-day window, we're doing all these processes of course, sending the ballots out, receiving them back, sorting them, validating, that they are complete, opening them, and then separating them out, and then scanning them. All this happens on networks that are internal networks, never connected to the outside, that are secure, and that securely store that information internally. We do not know any of the results. We don't have any way of knowing the results, and the systems are structured that way purposely. So we don't know anything about the results. We know totals. We know how many ballots have been scanned, that sort of thing. We know nothing about the results. And once all that is completed, then by law, once the polls close on election night, then we can begin to transmit those unofficial results. And that's when we'll know something. So we're fortunate that we have those 30 days because a lot of states do not. So that's going to really delay their results reporting.
So looking at the sorting and the opening of the ballots, is there a two-man, two-woman rule? So that there's somebody that's watching the person opening, or there's a couple people that are working on it at the same time. So there's more than one.
Right. Absolutely right. They are, everything's handled by bipartisan teams who handle everything in a totally nonpartisan way. There's always one person checking the other, and it's always under the supervision of either our absentee managers in the office, which are one of our more senior folks, or the directors or deputy directors in the county. And these also are, I think it's important to note, these are also, just like from the old days, absentee as well, public meetings. We do post them. They're public meetings. Anyone's welcome to come in and observe, see the process. We welcome that. Feel free to come in and see. We can show you everything, and it's completely transparent. But it does always happen under that format. Also, one of the things that we've done recently, and that we've done in the last year or so, is that we've enhanced the security significantly in our offices. So what we've done is we undertook a process. We had an evaluation of all our facilities. And this was even before vote by mail came in. An evaluation of our facilities we started about a year or so ago, and looked for enhancements for security. And what that entailed was a very significant upgrade of badge access, card access for our doors with logging, We have more than 50 security cameras at all our facilities now. So all that surveillance, all of that processing of ballots happens under video surveillance as well. So we have that additional level of security as well. I want folks to know that.
All right. I did get some phone calls during the primaries that party affiliation was on the envelopes. And now you and I discussed that. But, for people that, saw something on social media, the reasoning, the rationale behind the party and some other information being on the outside of those ballots.
Right. Those are used actually as part of the quality check process in terms of when the ballots are assembled, making sure that for a primary that the correct ballot and the correct ballot style is inserted into the ballot envelope. And you're right, we do see that for the primary. We, of course, do not see that for the general because we're only concerned with the individual ballot style. And I certainly appreciate, and I've talked to many folks as you have, of course, and of course, as we've talked, I certainly appreciate everybody's concern on that about privacy. And I always like to let everyone know that, of course, in Delaware by law, the voter registration information is public. So that actually is public information. So anyone could know that. But again, I appreciate everyone's, concerns and feedback on that. And I always like to let folks know why we do things. And I think it's always better to let folks know what it's out there for a reason.
Right.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. When should we know what the paper results would be? The mail-in and the absentee is that something that we're expecting not to know until 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock election night, or do you think you guys are going to be pretty much caught up by the time the polls close and all those paper ballots come in?
Yes, what our hope is, and what we're moving towards, certainly in preparation, is to have as much of those done and ready, scanned and finished by election day and by election night. The one unknown, of course, is on election day is that mail volume. And you mentioned that earlier too. If we get a ton of mail that comes in on election day, a lot of people have put their ballots in the mail, towards the end, and we get a ton of mail that will take time to process. And that could delay 100% reporting. Right. But even with that, we expect to have the overwhelming majority reported on election night too, and ideally 100%.
Right. Now, if there is a delay in reporting because of a large number, is that something that the department will either do a press release or put on social media, just so the folks that are, glued to their screens, their computer screens, and hitting refresh every, 30 seconds to what the results are, so that, they know, look, there's some more absentee ballots coming in. We got 3,000 in today that we have to process. We expect to have those numbers by 10 p.m. or whatever.
Right. Yes, we do have social media presence on our in our offices, so we'll definitely be making sure our offices take advantage of that to let folks know.
Okay. All right, so let's move. I really have one question about the machine or in-person voting, and that's based on the news that just came out in the last few days that Governor Carney has pretty much said you don't have to wear a mask if you're coming in to vote. And there's been some conflicting information. So what is the official ruling on mask? If you're going into a polling place, is a mask required, or are you going to be turned away if you refuse to wear a mask?
Right. Well, our policy on that basically has been the same policy we've had all year, and even prior elections, is that the mask wearing is strongly encouraged. We very much encourage that. No one will be turned away if they don't wear a mask, because we know voting is a fundamental right. All our poll workers and all the workers will be having masks, and they'll be having other protective equipment such as face shields and things like that. And they'll be doing all their very best to maintain social distancing and cleaning and sanitizing the equipment after each use. So we want folks to know that too, that we're doing our best to keep everything clean and safe and sanitized as well.
All right.
Safe environment.
Sherry on Facebook, we heard that if a mark goes onto anyone's ballot, it is voided. Is that correct?
That seems to be a meme out there, I guess you would call it, on social media. Our policy certainly is we don't mark the ballots at all. There's no need to mark the ballot paper at all. I think that came from another state. I'm not sure, but our policy is we do not mark the ballot at all. And the purpose for that being is that we want nothing on that ballot, just like a mail ballot, to be identifiable with a person in any way. We want it to be completely anonymous. Right. So yeah, that our folks are instructed they are not to do that. And there's no need for them to do that at all.
So when the ballot's printed out, just for people that go in there and they get a ballot, it's going to have a barcode. It's going to have some information at the top of it, so that the machine knows what ballot to present to the voter when they go into the machine.
That's exactly right. Thank you for mentioning that. That's exactly right. And I want folks to know, that's all that is. As you mentioned, you said it perfectly. That is all that does, and that's one of the benefits of our new equipment, is that it can display more than one ballot style, which is great for the voter in terms of flexibility, at the polling place. And certainly when the votes are displayed on the ballot after you've made your selections, you will see barcodes as well. And those barcodes just represent what those choices are. And the reason they're there is that, in practice, if we ever were to have a huge recount, let's ever say we had to have a statewide recount, in a very close race, that would help expedite that process. But one of the things that we want folks to know is none of that is personally identifiable. There's no time date stamp. We don't even know what machine that ballot was processed on. Now, granted, all the ballots on a machine go into a secure ballot box on that machine that is sealed, so they're kept together. But we never know that you voted on machine 1, that Anthony came in and voted on machine 3 at 10 o'clock, in the morning. We never want there to be anything identifiable on that.
Okay. All right. Very good. If you have any questions on here, make sure you post it on to Facebook. We've been answering the questions that they've come in, and also to YouTube. We're going to get into kind of our last section right now. So get your questions in. Results reporting. There were some hiccups with the statewide primary that happened in September in getting some of the results out. You had a couple of different times where the results would show up. They said it was 100% precincts reporting, and it really wasn't. Those numbers got backed out. So what happened with that? And is that something that the issue was identified? It's fixed for the next election.
Right. Yes, that's right. We've been working with DTI. It's a project that DTI had for updating the election night results site, which was also something, we had wanted to do as well, but it was certainly a project that they had taken the initiative to do. And you're right, that results reporting piece that was identified and that was corrected after that initially on the primary night. Now you'll notice, and folks will notice, the site's a lot different, a lot more rich in terms of information and presentation. It does refresh a bit. It's slower than the old site. Part of that, it's not so much the reason being that the presentation of the site, but it really involves more of the hardware behind the scenes. Our old system was operated largely off of our old mainframe system in the state, so you could report out much more quickly. And DTI has been working on to improve that speed of refresh, but since we have now external equipment and a different method that we use, because we are using systems that aren't all completely within the state network, like on a mainframe, there is that bit of a slower refresh, and we're working with them to get that quicker.
Okay.
Much quicker.
Okay. We did have one more question come in about the masks again.
Sure.
Who made the decision about the mask? Was that the Board of Elections? Was that the governor's office? How did that decision about not requiring masks come about? What's kind of the background on that?
Like I said, that was we consult, of course, with our legal folks. We consult with the Department of Justice folks as well to determine that. And really, like the ultimate, I guess, decision making on that really gets back to that whole idea of voting as a fundamental right, that we cannot deny anyone to vote, for that reason. And I'm the first to admit I want, personally, I hope folks wear masks, and I'll tell you that the compliance rate has been overwhelming in the elections all year. Like I said, this has been the same policy all year, and very few people come in not wearing the masks. And we really do encourage everyone to do that. It's better for their health. It's better for the poll workers. But people have been very, very cooperative. with this. And our poll workers are instructed and trained that they are to treat everyone equally, regardless, and to provide that same level of professionalism and respect to everyone and be as efficient as they can. Okay. We want to service the voters.
And I actually have had some emails and some concerns from some of the individuals that work as poll workers saying,
sure,
well, how can they do that? They're putting, our health at risk, and there's a little bit of concern from those individuals as well. But,
sure.
And if this has been a policy, I don't know if the policy has really been as publicized as it recently was, but it definitely has got some conversation going.
Yeah, and you're right. And there's a lot of, and many states are facing the same, situation that we are. Yeah, and again, and it is a balance. It's a balancing act. You're right, and even though you're right, it has not had as much attention earlier in the year, although it was in place.
Have there been any? And this is another one that came from Dave. I think Dave I actually used to work with. Have there been any poll workers that have decided not to work because of that announcement of that policy?
We've had a few, but we've actually had more. There was actually more challenge in general earlier in the year, just overall around the COVID situation. Now we've been really fortunate that we had a lot of good practices in place, like I mentioned earlier, to preserve that safety and sanitation in the polling place, and we've actually gotten a lot of new poll workers. Actually, in addition, most of our experienced poll workers have stayed around. Certainly, we respect those who decided not to continue, but we've actually done a lot of outreach with other organizations as well to help augment the number of poll workers. So it's actually, I think it's been a win-win in terms of getting some new folks in as well as our very experienced folks that we rely on.
Okay, great. I think that does it for our questions tonight. Anthony, I want to thank you very much for spending the time this evening answering questions. Again, this is an extraordinary election. There's a lot of moving parts to it, a lot of things that are different for people, things that they aren't used to, and being able to hear from you tonight and answer some of the questions that people have been asking, I think has been very helpful to a lot of people to be more comfortable about what's going to be happening on the 3rd. So again, thank you very much all for the questions. If you have any more questions that weren't answered tonight, please feel free to email me. We'll go ahead and put that in the comments. But Anthony, have a great night and try to get some sleep, okay?
Thanks, Senator. I appreciate it.
All right, take care now.
Take care. Bye-bye.